Hello, I am Anidra. I am the Advocacy Associate here for SSWAA. And today I am sitting at the table with two of the greatest, and I will give them the opportunity to introduce themselves in just a moment. But today we are here to have some conversations surrounding advocacy and what advocacy looks like in our role as school social workers, not just on the micro level, but the meso and macro level as well. So I'm going to give them the floor to introduce themselves, and then we're going to have some conversations around what advocacy looks like and how we can translate that advocacy, not just from our day-to-day work as school social workers, but on a national level. So I'll give the floor to you, Abby, ladies first, Rob, and then you can introduce yourself and we'll pass it to you.
Welcome, or thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. My name's Abby Cobb. I am the coordinator of social work services in Richland School District Two, which is in Columbia, South Carolina. And I've had the distinguished pleasure of serving in that role since 2012. Currently, we have 22 social workers in our district, so I make the 23rd. And prior to that, I was working in the district as a school social worker. So I've been in the district for 18 years, I believe. So super excited to be here today and honor my amazing staff.
Yes, love it. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, so I'm Rob Lucio. I'm the President-Elect for SSWAA. And previous to this, I have served as the Advocacy and Legislative Action Committee Chair with Emily Serrata for, I think, about 4.5 years. I think we served together. And so have worked on SSWAA's legislative priorities, done some advocacy work, and then prior to that, I had been a school social worker for 15 years, and just excited to be here and the things that we're doing, and so happy that you're taking over that work and really spearheading that. I think that's a great move for SSWAA to, I think you're going to be fantastic in pushing this forward, what it looks like next.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate those kind words. Well, I don't want to belabor the time. I want us to just dive right in, have some really interesting conversations. So when we start thinking about advocacy, right, I want to ask us, what does meaningful advocacy look like for school social workers right now, considering the climate, considering administration and what that looks like? What do we think meaningful advocacy would look like for us as school social workers?
I think one, for me at the district level and at the state level in South Carolina, I also didn't include this, but I'm the vice president of our state association, the South Carolina Association of School Social Workers. And so I really think that particularly unique to South Carolina is we're still at that really raising awareness stage of what school social work is, what is the work that we're doing, and the value that we bring to the school system. So I think it's really educating people that school social work is more than providing just resources. There's a wide range of services. I always say, when I'm doing interviews, we serve birth to death. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's just really spending time making sure that people know and understand what a school social worker is. I think there's still a lot of stereotypes that we combat when people hear the word social worker. So really spending time trying to explain what our roles are. And I think it's a changing system with education as well as what we are facing in my district is there's been a lot of turnover. There's been a lot of new administrators coming in and sometimes taking for granted that even if they were in education system that they really understood a school social work position. So I see advocacy really for us at the micro level, really just focusing on what are the roles of school social workers and how can we be used to the greatest capacity to benefit the schools.
I love that too. You want to add to it? Yeah, I think I see it a little differently in my world because I'm maybe more broad picture type things, but I also think that I think meaningful advocacy just looks like doing something. Mm-hmm. And that we all have different roles and different passions and different skills. And so I think that just doing something sometimes is enough. I think of I'm a policy person. I love reading policy. I love thinking about policy. I know I've heard not everybody likes that, but there are other people who are boots on the ground. We're going to be like knocking on doors or talking to the principal. And I think sometimes we get overwhelmed and maybe our piece is just this little piece. But as a system, we have to think, is everything getting done? So I think meaningful advocacy is something that changes or supports. I mean, it could be we're not changing anything, but we want to support something more. And so, so anyway, so I just think meaningful advocacy is just doing something. And I think people are worried where to start, and I would just say start somewhere, whether that is policy, if that's your expertise, or talking to people, or the people that I know who hate talking to people, I'm not going to put them in front of a legislator or a policymaker or like I said, there are some people who are just boots on the ground, and you need someone who's going to fight for that student who's in front of you. And we all have different issues we're passionate about too. And so I think that's also a challenge, because sometimes people say, well, we're not doing enough because it's your issue and we're not doing enough for your issue, but for others we might be saying we're doing too much. So I just think it's also having those conversations about what is our end goal and what are we doing to get there, and I think that may be the better question of, and if it's not working, as a Dr. Phil was like, how's that working for you? Right, I'd say that, right? If it's not working, what do we need to do different anyway?
Yeah. And I think both of what you both shared is absolutely meaningful, especially coming from the state level. And I'm from South Carolina, so much of what you say resonates. But even so much, Rob, from what you shared, and how are we able to translate much of what we've talked about from that state level to our national efforts, to our federal efforts, and how do we advocate for that? And I also heard you kind of share that some people may not, right? It may not be easy for them to stand in front of a legislator and talk, but just to encourage them that the data, right, the things that you're doing in your schools, those boots on the ground moments, if we are taking the time to really write those things down, track it, those are things that do lead to bigger trends that leads to things that we can advocate for at the national level. So, thank y'all.
Well, I really appreciate that perspective, because I think it can also make it feel less daunting, right? And so just to advocate on behalf of school social work, that sounds huge, and that sounds like there's so many different ways to do that, but I appreciate that because it's really highlighting the strengths of each individual person.
And maybe your stories go to the person who talks to the person on the Hill, and so they have the stories to share, and that's what they need. And I think there's also, right, people are worried sometimes about their jobs and all of this, and I'm not in someone's shoes to say, yeah, it's okay to lose your job, to not be able to feed your family. I'm not in that space, and so some people are okay doing that, and we have to support all of that, and just recognize that as long as we're doing something together, we'll make change.
And I think you guys both said something that kind of leads me to this next question. What mindset shift, if any, do you feel like is necessary for school social workers to have when we're kind of moving from feeling so overwhelmed about advocacy on whatever level? What mindset shifts do you feel like is necessary for us to have in order to effectively advocate at whatever level we choose, or what's most comfortable for us?
I had just a really interesting experience, very connected to this 2 days ago when I was traveling to this conference, and there was a pretty big meeting happening in my community that I couldn't attend, obviously, and so I sent a representative, one of my staff, and she sent me a text message, and she said, "This is way above my pay grade." And there was meetings with, I think, pretty significant people throughout the state and in our county, and it was so interesting because I did say to her, your voice, what you have to say about your clients and your students that you serve, many times they're not experiencing that. They're seeing things from a different level, and so your daily experience is the voice that needs to be heard. And I think we discredit that a lot, not realizing that the experiences that we have and the things that we learn from our families and the work that we're doing, sharing that and sharing their voice on behalf of families is going to make a difference. And people often hear numbers, and numbers are absolutely needed. Data is 100% needed, but you've got to, in my opinion, it's really helpful to have a face behind that number, share what that truly means, and I think that that's what the boots on the ground staff can really do, is they're so passionate about their kids, they're so passionate about their families, and they know them so well, they know what's needed, and who else can say that better than them?
Yeah. I talk a lot about the idea that we need the art of advocacy, which is our stories, but we also need the science of advocacy, which are the data, and until we combine them, things don't change. But I also think the mind shift, and I'm trying to just think, is really you belong is the word that comes to mind, because I think there's some imposter syndrome sometimes, and and I like to see that differently. It's not as imposter syndrome, but I'm learning. You know, I tell my students sometimes, like, you know, they're like, I'm struggling with this, and I'm like, well, if you weren't, why would you be in school, right? And so just recognizing that where you are in that moment, you belong, but it doesn't also have to be where you are tomorrow, and that you can change that. And I challenge each person to play whatever part they can. And again, it may be like, I can't do it, but I can give money to a cause that can do the kinds of things that I need to do. And it may be electing the officials who believe in your beliefs. But whatever it is, I just think that you belong doing what you're doing today, and tomorrow doesn't have to be the same thing you're doing.
Oh, I love that. That resonates. Especially the you belong. Because I think sometimes, especially just kind of how Abby shared earlier, and I don't know, and I know every state can be a little bit different, but oftentimes social work, school social work in particular, is treated as almost like the stepkid. And so trying to find positioning where we fit in, constantly, you know, as long as school social work has been a thing, still having to say, this is what we do, this is what we don't do. And having to do that every day can sometimes get you lost in that concept of, but I belong here. Like I deserve the right to take up space and advocate for the things that matter to me and that I'm passionate about. And I think that is beautiful in like shifting our mindsets, right? Just being able to tell ourselves, yep, we know we do hard work, right? Whether that's micro, macro, the work that we do is daunting. It's a lot, it can be tedious, but we matter and we belong, and our voice matters and our voice belongs. And I think that opens us up to just more the national level, where we talk about how our voice does matter, because if we're not talking, decisions are going to be made, right? Those decisions are going to be made whether we're at the table having those conversations, advocating, or if we're not. The downfall is if we're not there, then those decisions are going to be made absent from the stories that we get to be a part of in our everyday lived experience. And so I think that kind of leads me to how can we prepare, right? How can we prepare those who do have those stories, and they are open, and they are kind of following in that mindset shift, like, oh yeah, I belong, I can talk. How do we prepare them to engage at the national level?
So at the national level, I would tell them to attend the Legislative Institute.
Yes.
Right.
Perfect segue.
So attend the Legislative Institute in July.
Yes.
I think it's an opportunity to. I think what I've found is, I have a study looking at the impact of the Legislative Institute. And what we found was that the ability to say, you know, it's not as bad as I thought. Like I can do this, right? Like I can talk to a legislator, I can walk into their office, I can, right? And that is that whole I belong doing what I'm doing. And so I think getting involved again somewhere, and whatever your talents are today, and whatever time you have, and maybe a year from now, your kids are going to be doing something different, so you have more time or less time. But just, like I said, just keep moving forward. But I think the Legislative Institute, getting involved with SSWAA, looking at the advocacy resources, not waiting, I think sometimes for things to happen, like reaching out to you and say, hey, here's an issue, and I'm happy to write a position paper on this, or I'm happy to write bullet points, because also you said, right, what happens at every state impacts nationally, but every state is different. Everybody's lived experience is different. My district that I came from, when I was at one school or another, they were very different. And so maybe thinking about, like, how can I now support you doing this work by saying, hey, not just, hey, do something, but more, here's some things that could help you. If it's helpful, here's some bullet points I thought about. Maybe that's helpful, right? Or this is an area I'm passionate about. Can I work on that with you only? I'm really interested in social work as a profession. And so maybe I'm just going to focus on that. And how can I help you do that? I think there's a lot of waiting for other people to do. And a couple years ago, we had a shirt that said, we're the people we've been waiting for. And so like why are we waiting for, this is us. Like, why are we not the ones that people look up and say, oh, look what they're doing? And I think sometimes we wait. And
But I want to challenge that a little bit more, Rob. Why? Why do you feel like we think we're not the ones?
I think our practice experience has not been in macro in the way that I think, I think we have our ethical mandates, certainly, but I also think there's a space where I've been doing a little looking. I have a student, a doc student who's doing some really amazing work around moral injury, moral distress, and this idea of like our values of who our being is under attack. And sometimes we're just burned out. And so it's like, well, how can I add one more thing? Or why am I going to talk to someone who isn't going to change anything? right? And my advice would be like, why are they in office? Let's look at people who match our values, and maybe you work on that campaign instead. Maybe you run for school board, or you go to the campaign school, the Nancy Humphreys campaign school, and you run for office. Or we only have 2 social workers in Congress right now, Hillary Skolton and Sylvia Garcia. We had 5 at one point. So maybe I challenge you out there to be the next person to run for office and be that change. And then we'll come visit you on the Hill.
Right.
You know.
Love it. Yeah, I love it. So Abby, I wanna come to you because I think you have more of the micro meso kind of mindset, right? And so when we think about those that are hearing the words of Robin, like, oh yeah, I think maybe I can do this, maybe I do belong. What?
Take out the maybe.
Okay.
Right.
I can do this.
And I do belong.
I do belong.
Yes.
I love that. Thanks for correcting me. What do you feel like, what advice would you give them if they're like reading and like, yep, I can do this. I got it. What advice do you feel like you would give them about using their experiences, not only responsibly, but strategically as well?
I think that there's 2 layers there. I think about really locally, whether that's in their school or in their district, of that could be going and having a conversation with their principal, right? Or it could be taking that to the principal's leadership or scheduling time with the deputy superintendent. School boards many times don't know and understand. So would you be willing to potentially go to a public session if that is something that is considered safe? Another thing that really comes to mind as working on the board for our state association is getting involved with the state association. And I would say the same thing, and I've learned this, and I think that I was guilty of kind of sitting back and waiting. I wanted to do more nationally, and when I put myself out there, opportunities came up. And so I think even just for us as a state association, we have lots of committees because the board can't do all the work on its own. It needs committee people, and we need voices from around the state to represent, again, across the state. And so I think that there's multiple layers that you can really look at. And understanding, yes, it is more time. There's no doubt about it. There's no denying that but I think it's a growing experience, and it's something that can be really meaningful. And when you're sitting in your state association, conference or meetings, and we're presenting and showing the ways that we've grown, it's because of the work of those committee members and those board members. So I think that there's lots of opportunities to grow that. And I know, speaking as a social work supervisor, one of the things that I am focusing on currently within my district is really focusing on advocacy for the role of the school social worker. And I was hearing my staff say, I'm frustrated. People don't know what I'm doing. I don't feel like they're utilizing me in the right ways. And we've made great strides since I've been in my position, but again, we had a lot of turnover. And so I would say, if you're frustrated or you're having things to say, again, your voice matters. So whether or not you have a social work supervisor or not, sharing those things, I think that sometimes I don't know if this is my experience, is we maybe feel like we're not being valued, and that value should be inherent, right? But what I also try to really share with my staff is it's not personal. It's not personal. It is, when you're working multiple schools, out of sight, out of mind. Mm-hmm. It's not personal, and you have to be the one, you're the driver. It's really not a 50-50 relationship. Yeah. It's a 75 you, 25 them. And so you almost kind of have to market yourself. And when you do that, more times than not, I think it's really successful, but just not taking it personally. And so just, going out there and being willing to put yourself out there, whatever that looks like for you, whether that's the principal, your district, or even your state association.
Yeah, and can I add, I think one of the things when we talk about language, and this just reminds me, I think sometimes we distance ourselves in our language because we talk about being in a host setting. And I think we need to shift that, at least my beliefs, we need to shift to we belong, this is our setting, and we're integral. So when we say host setting, it almost feels like we're not part of this system and we're outsiders who don't understand. And I think sometimes that also alienates us versus saying this is our home as well.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't even think about it like that. Now it is causing my wheels to turn, what level of conversation, what language am I using that, whether I realize it or not, is still isolating me. And now I'm arguing about how we belong, but I'm using the language that consistently separates me to not belong. So thank you, Rob. Now, and I want to come to you, Rob, because I know that you've led amazing advocacy efforts legislatively. And so right now I want to ask, what do you think would be the most crucial policy priorities right now at the national level that school social workers should be looking to engage in?
Wow, that's a great question. Right, it's such a great question because I think, because we have state issues and we have national issues, and they're not always the same. I think what we're seeing cut across everything. I think we're definitely seeing roles cut across everything. Certification is something that goes across, but I don't see much happening in DOE around that. I think the other big one we're seeing is funding. Federal funding being cut. The latest round of grants that came out in the fall were only for school psych. And so how do we then work with other coalitions, OTPT, getting the profession, social work as a profession changed? I think those are the two I would say, funding and the profession, because that will also impact the students who can go to school, and particularly around like a DSW or a PhD, and that's our leadership in our field as well. So I would say those would be my two, but I also didn't recognize that every state has different things that we're looking at, in terms of.
So elaborate for me, if you can, a little bit. So say, for instance, this is a new school social worker. They've listened to us today and say, oh, I want to get involved, particularly around funding or particularly around my role. What does that look like? What actionable steps can they take kind of moving forward to get involved?
Yeah, I think joining the Advocacy and Legislative Action Committee is probably the first place. And then thinking about, if that's your passion, then thinking about how do you take that on. So you'd say, I'm really interested, we'll talk about social work as a profession as an example. There's a House bill that's introduced, but there's no Senate companion bill. And they're not going to introduce it, I don't think, until there's a Republican, across the aisle, a bipartisan sponsors. And so maybe you'd say, okay, I'm going to work with you and say, what do we need to do to get this bill? Like, there's a process, and it's not going to go anywhere until there's a bill in place, right? I know there's a comment period, and I don't know that that'll change much, but get more people on the House side. So maybe if that's something they're passionate about, they could reach out to you and say, what do we need to do to lead this? And then help draft some bullet points and sort of take that on. Maybe there's a subcommittee of that, because I don't think we can do it all in addition to our own jobs and state level. And so to do a national level is very different, because we also recognize that SWAA can't do every state, given that all 50 states have different certification requirements, and all, if you're talking about funding, that could be a different district. So you're talking about every district has a different funding model or applying for grants. But I would say if they're not available to apply for, that's a problem. That's something you could do nationally. If we're not seen as a profession, and again, I say that to say we are professionals, and that's different than, but the impact is on our loans. And when, in my experience for social workers, over half are second career. And so if you've already used up the loan limit now, we have a shortage of mental health providers, and you can't get them. Now, what is this going to look for our youth later? So those are the kinds of conversations I might have, is to say, if we have a shortage and you're limiting the number that can go, and how do you get your legislators to be on board? So working to draft, I'd say, like action alerts, but just say, like, yes, SWAA could do it, but maybe I can help and reach out to the national committee and say, I'm willing to focus on this. This is my area of passion, and this is what I'd like to work on, and I'm sure you'll have work for them to do.
Boots on the ground, right?
Yep.
But as we kind of prepare ourselves to kind of wrap up, I appreciate that. I appreciate that perspective. And I think for those that may be listening, those that may be watching, we've given them a lot of areas. There's not just one specific thing that's happening, and if you don't like it, you can't, right? There are a gamut of things that's going on at one time. You find your passion, find your niche, find what you're passionate about, use your voice, advocate, even if that's not at the national level yet, right? Advocating for our local elections, advocating for our state elections, and so forth and so on, so that we can get the due justice, right? Or the due recognition that we deserve. So I want to ask us this, and then we can kind of wrap up for today. And I'll pose this question to the both of you. What would success look like in the next few years if state or national advocacy efforts continue to grow?
So when I was looking at your questions earlier, my initial response was funding.
There you go.
Was, we'd be successful when, with funding. And that absolutely is part of it, and I would shout it from the rooftops if there was more funding. I think my mind, just in having these discussions, it really looks different for me as a local leader. Success looks like keeping my staff. Success looks like I have staff who feel valued and respected in their roles, and they recognize that they have an impact. Success looks like when I have an opening, I have qualified candidates to meet that demand. Success looks like, we continue to educate about our roles, and if we were, called in before the house was on fire, and so I think that success looks at it in a lot of different ways, and my staff change lives every single day, and the impact that they have had, I have over half of my staff have been in their roles for more than 10 years. They are impacting generations to come, and so we are already successful. And they're gonna continue to do so. Like you said, you just continue to do the work. And so, but I think for me, it's success would look like you feel valued, respected, and you want to stay in this work, continuing to want people to come into this work, and then we continue to have the funding to back up that we can continue to hire them and keep them.
Yeah, I love that, because I also had like a bunch of things, and then I started to think, like, as we're talking, like, I think being there and living our values is success, right? If we can do that every day, and then also recognizing, as I didn't say earlier, but I think there's a individual level, like I'm working with this student. Success might be that this student gets the service that they need, right? But it might be at the system level that to say this policy is really impacting all of our students and the discipline in our school, and we're moving to restorative justice. But it could also look like we're the profession is getting funded. So I would think of like success differently we have an individual level, we have a system level, we have a profession level, we have our self level. Like, do I take care of am I still here next year? And not like because I'm waiting for retirement, right? And I've got too many years in the system, right? I was at that point, right? Like you're like, okay, what's the point where I'm gonna stay no matter what? But I'm here because I wanna be here, and it's who I am, and I'm still a school social worker, and every day I want people to know that. And that to me would be success. That this burnout that I think we sometimes feel is directed in a way to say that if I'm not here, who is? I can't wait for someone else to come in and do the things that need to be done for the system, for the students, for the profession. I can do my part, and that to me would be success. Obviously it would be great if we wouldn't have to have this conversation a year from now and be like, oh, we got so much money. But as a realist, I think showing up every day, being here, growing our profession, next year or the year after, having 3,000 people at the conference would be success, because we're here and we're living our values.
Got it. Well, I want to say thank y'all. Thank you so much. You hear about the Southern. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your input. It's invaluable. You guys do great work at both levels. And so I want us to close with any last things that you want to say. If the listeners here hear nothing else, what is that one thing that you want them to hear and kind of stick and resonate in their hearts, that they get up or they end this podcast carrying with them for the rest of their lives?
Well, big question.
I know.
I love my job. I've been in the same district, I'm going on 20 years, and I hope that I retire from there. I think it's a distinct pleasure that we get to be with these kids and these families. And for many of us, for years, where else could you have a system where you could be involved with these children from kindergarten to 12th grade? My favorite time of the year was graduation. Prior to becoming the lead, I was working at a high school, and man, the best feeling in the world. I've started asking my high school social workers to invite the elementary social workers to graduation. And they're in the elephant room before they walk out, because that is the most amazing feeling in the world. But I guess I would just want people to know that what you do matters. And I'm getting a little sidetracked, but what you do matters, and we have the distinct pleasure of walking alongside with families, and oftentimes in some of their most hardest times. In the worst of times, I feel like you see the most beautiful aspect of the world, and we get to be a part of that. What more could you ask for?
Well, I don't know if there's much I could add to that, right? Other than thank you for the work you're doing. I think that maybe sometimes just taking a moment to take in all the people who are doing this work, and and I mean, we're here speaking, but we started our journey somewhere, and I think everybody could be doing this, or should be, or will be doing this, and I don't think there's anything special about us. Maybe we got the opportunities came to us in ways that we said yes in that moment, but I don't think we're any different, and it takes all of us to do something, and that I appreciate the work that the profession's doing, and I'm honored to call myself a school social worker every day, and just happy that you're taking over and the work that you're doing, and that at every state level. So I don't want to. I mean, I'm more national level, so that's where my vision is. But I also recognize at the state level, every day, people are going in and doing the work, and any of us can do that, and you just don't know who's going to have that moment that changes a student's life. Changes the legislator's life who says, I hadn't thought of it that way. Every moment can be pivotal for our profession and for our youth and their families. I don't want to forget those either.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to say thank you all so much for tuning in. Please take these words, allow them to resonate, and understand that you belong, you matter. The work that you do is invaluable. So use the voice that we have, because remember, advocacy is not extra work, right? It's ethical. It's our ethical obligation, our ethical duty. So thanks for watching. Thanks for tuning in. And we'll see you guys again soon.